It's been a traditional end to the year with Magnus Carlsen winning the World Rapid and World Blitz titles over the last few days. Yep, he's done the double again. So he now has 5 Rapid World titles, 7 Blitz World titles, and of course 5 Classical World titles to his name. An extraordinary achievement. And I'm going to show you the first game he played in the World Blitz Championship just a few days ago. By the way, if you've enjoyed this channel over the year with all the videos that we've been posting, then do help us keep the lights on. Do support us via Patreon and check out the rewards, extra videos, newsletter, test game, specially curated opening playlists. Or you can just give us a one-off donation via PayPal. Do check out the links in the video description and I'll put them in the comments as well. So anyway, let's take a look at this. So this was game number 1 from the World Blitz Championship. So this was a 21 round event. So this was not a fluke that Magnus won the title. He really had to earn his keep here. Very tough. I mean, an incredibly strong tournament. So he's got white against Sergei Grigoriants. It's a Spanish. And I have a particular reason for selecting this game. You might recall that I've shown a couple of games this autumn actually, where Magnus played exactly this line with white. And watch what happens. It repeats exactly this line with bishop g5. So this is like the big Magnus Carlsen trick in the Spanish. So this bishop has come outside the pawn chain. It means it can't return to e7 to break that pin. And this pin is incredibly uncomfortable. We've seen Magnus employ this in rapid games. There was a game against Tabatabai, which he won beautifully. I'll just show you that very briefly. He won, I think it was a classical game against Gretarsson from Iceland. And this is just very awkward for black to meet. How do you break the pin? You know, you don't want to have your kingside pawns damaged. And in a blitz game in particular, where you don't have time to sort of work through the subtleties, it's so uncomfortable for black. I mean, if it's difficult enough for black in a classical game, imagine in a blitz game. Standard Spanish. This is a beautiful bishop here. This is an awkward bishop here, and this knight is about to flip round to this wonderful square on e3. Now, this game against Tabatabai from earlier in the year went g5, and if you recall, Carlsen found a way to bring a knight to f5. So this knight is on its way to e3. Just as a very quick recap, so it's already looking at these key squares here. That's the problem when you play g5. Weakens the f5 square. Now Tabatabai eliminated that knight, but watch what happened. Carlsen played knight h4. Beautiful move. If that's taken, then that's a deadly attack. That'll be recaptured. And in the game, that knight managed to reach that beautiful attacking square f5. Kasparov's favourite attacking piece, a knight on f5 when there's a king on g8. And Carlsen won very smoothly. So let's go back. Now in this game, Grigoriants did not play g5. He was understandably very wary of playing that move. He played bishop e6 to just match that bishop on b3. Carlsen didn't play knight f1 straight away. He could have done, but he played castles. And after black castled, he played rook e1. So normal stuff. This rook can support the e-pawn when white goes for a d4 advance, and also it prepares the spin of the knight around to e3, sometimes even g3. If black plays g5 here to break the pin, of course the bishop can just drop back, but this is also a very dangerous idea for white. Followed by queen f3, and that is not easy to defend against. So that's why Grigoriants played king h8. He wants to support that g-pawn with the rook. Carlsen played a4, standard Spanish move, to just put the question to that pawn. Little bit awkward for black to meet. You know, you have to decide. You don't want to exchange, that just damages the structure. Playing b4 is also can be risky, but anyway, black played rook b8. So it's just a nice move to flick in, this a4, because you never know when this rook might be able to use the a file. Knight f1, the standard maneuver, takes place. Rook g8, black is still very wary of playing g5. Carlsen exchanges and opens up the a file, and knight e3. So his moves so far, I'm sure he would have played in a nanosecond. You know, he's done nothing original in this game at all. He's played exactly this strategy 100 times. And finally, black is tempted to play g5, but he's got his rook on g8, so he's prevented a sacrifice, but the bishop goes back. And now Carlsen can look to perhaps exploit the weakness of that f5 square, as we're going to see. In fact, he manages to in the end. But it's not just the weakness of f5, it's the fact that the king is opened as well. And just compare the two king positions, 3 lovely pawns in front of the king, and these advanced pawns are, well, they compromise black's king position. Now, perhaps the safest way for black to play here is to exchange off that knight on e3. Let's exchange those bishops and then just go king g7, protecting a few pieces. White is better here. Perhaps soon you're going to push with d4, put some pressure here. Perhaps h3, perhaps h4. It's nice to have some control over the a file as well. White is better. But for the moment, there's no chance of, for example, a knight landing on f5. Queen d7 played instead. And now this is a very clever move from Carlsen. He plays bishop c2. That means that when d4 comes, there is a real traffic jam of pieces here. So once d4 comes in, d5 is threatened, and you can see that that bishop is just running out of room. Could easily be trapped, of course. Yeah, just a simple fork is threatened. But yeah, the fact that the bishop has very limited options, that's a problem. And of course, there's pressure here as well after d4 comes. So that's the threat, d4. And Carlsen has dropped that bishop back before black can exchange off. Knight g4 played. So that is to give this bishop some room after, let's say, the exchange here. And that's playable. But Carlsen, of course, keeps the tension. He plays knight d5. So not going to f5 this time, but going to the other outpost, d5. That's also very awkward for black to meet. Well, first of all, you might just have in mind to exchange off knight for bishop. It could be you just want to play h3, and then this knight is stuck. Remember, the knight is covering f6 now. The knight was exchanged off. I mean, if you try f5, I mean, that's could be a little bit tricky, but watch what happens. Okay, knight takes bishop. Okay, exchange that one off before it advances. Bishop comes here with a threat. And now just h4. You can see that this is a lot of fun for white, this kind of position. King is exposed. There's going to be a hit sooner or later. There's pressure here, of course. White's king completely safe. Look at these pieces in front of the king. And d4 could be in the air. White's position is really elastic. I think that's what's really nice. And the piece is really harmoniously placed. Whereas, yeah, split rook's not great. Open king, it's all a bit ragged. So it's difficult for black already. Bishop takes, knight played. Pawn takes, and the knight drops back to e7. Now, this is the monster piece because it has no opponent. There's no light squared bishop to match that bishop on c2. So d4 is the obvious move. Opening up the diagonal, well, it doesn't take too much imagination to play queen d3 and queen a7 mate. And that's in the air. Excuse me. Black has to be very, very careful. If knight takes pawn, then pawn takes, well, you can see all these lines opening. You can imagine a bishop on e5. That king is already in trouble. The knight is threatened. Dreadful position. So after d4, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. So that opens up the diagonal for the queen, hitting the knight. So there's a threat to play rook takes knight on e7 and queen takes knight. This knight also looks at some key squares in the position as well. So a wonderful position for white. Now, black blunders straight away. I mean, he's under pressure. It's a blitz game. When I say blitz, the time control was 3 minutes plus 2 second increment. So real pressure. And black cracks here straight away. The only way for black to play was to retreat the knight to f6. But, I mean, white has a beautiful position here. h4, open things up. You know, let's expose the king. Very promising position for white. But in the game, black played knight g6. And a very fitting final move, bishop f5. Attacking the queen. And then on the next move, you play queen takes knight. So isn't it interesting how the weakness of the f5 square told in the end? And it all stems back to that move, g5. That's the problem. So, but this is absolutely not an easy position for black to negotiate once that bishop arrives on g5, as we've seen on several occasions on this channel. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Remember, if you want to support the channel, if you've enjoyed everything we've had to offer over the year, then do check out patreon.com. You'll find the link to my Patreon channel in the video description, or if you just want to donate via PayPal, we'd be very grateful. Happy New Year.